welcome to the Flourishing Center podcast. I'm Amelia Zhivatovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living, and we're so grateful that you're here. Each episode features 3 sections. First is the Science Says section, where we summarize a recent research study and show you how to put the science into action. Next, we give you a research-based life hack with simple strategies for incorporating positive psychology into your life for greater well-being. And then our Practitioner Corner is where we interview someone who's out there living, breathing, and spreading positive psychology in their own unique way. Learn about how they're growing their personal and professional work and get inspired with strategies for how you might use positive psychology in your own life. Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Hello everybody, and thanks for listening. Today's Science Says, we are covering a research study that has recently come out looking at who is at risk for becoming addicted to social media. We're going to use that knowledge and explore what are these addictive patterns that we get into as human beings and how we can hack our life and build our self-regulation for today's life hack. And in our Practitioner Corner, meet Sandy, a positive psychology practitioner who is bringing positive psychology to teenagers in a technical school. Learn all about how she's brought positive psychology into her life and into the well-being of these adolescents and many more. Let's dive in. Today's Science Says is a research article published in the Journal of Addictive Behaviors. The article is titled, "The Relationship Between Addictive Use of Social Media, Narcissism, and Self-Esteem, Findings from a Large National Survey." In this study, they looked at 23,532 Norwegians and measured them on the Bergen Social Media Addiction Scale, as well as the Narcissistic Personality Inventory and the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale. The researchers aimed to understand what would be some of the individual differences or personality or demographic differences that would be associated with different levels of being addicted to social media. They found a number of differences. They found that people who were lower in age were more likely to report being addicted to social media. Higher scores of social media addiction were found among the following groups: women who are not in a relationship, people with lower education status, lower income status, and lower self-esteem, and people with higher narcissism rates. The reason I find this particular research study interesting and important for us to take a look at is that social media has the propensity to be incredibly addicting, but as do many other sources of technology, and that what we can learn from any of the research that's coming out around addiction is something that we can infer to many other addictive patterns within our life. So you might find that you don't have an addictive pattern to social media use. However, you might respond at the drop of a hat to your email ping going off, or to a text message going off on your phone, or many other sources of distraction. So while this is a research study that demonstrates that social media can be addicting, and it gives us some opportunities to take a look at what are the reasons that people might be getting addicted to social media that give us an opportunity to address those issues. It also gives us an opportunity to explore what does it mean to become addicted to technology and how we can prevent some of those addictive patterns. What they found a strong association to was the possibility that people are using social media as a form of distraction and as a way of countering some of the discomfort that they might feel if they are feeling a little lower on their self-esteem or on their self-image, and that they might be turning to the social outlet as a way of getting that need met. However, as you might imagine, it might not be the best strategy because it can temporarily make people feel better, but leave them feeling empty inside afterwards. One of the key things I want to highlight from this article is that we can explore that tendency to feel uncomfortable and want to step into a behavior that may not be helpful for us, and explore how else can I deal with my feeling of feeling bored or uncomfortable or unclear, and recognize that any time that we have this knee-jerk reaction pattern of my body wants me to just reach for my phone and check my email, or I have this idea pop up in my mind and I just want to act on it right away, we might benefit from curbing that enthusiasm and maybe using social media as a reward, or maybe looking at asking ourselves, what am I really wanting when I'm continuing this behavior that may or may not be helpful for me? In our life hack, we're going to explore how do we boost our willpower and prevent ourselves from becoming addicted to a thought, to a feeling, or to a behavior. Today's life hack explores what does it mean to increase our sense of self-regulation and willpower. As our science has hinted, we live in a world where it's so easy for people to get caught up in an addictive pattern to their impulses, whether that impulse be to check your text messages the moment they come in, or keeping email running in the background, or an obsessive thought that you just can't get rid of. It's important to know that many of the patterns that we experience all follow a similar brain pattern, regardless of the addictive pattern, whether it be addiction to food, addiction to a thought, addiction to an emotion. It all involves an area of our brain that's considered our motivation region, our basal ganglia. And one of the best ways of learning to work with those impulses is recognize what is it actually asking of you in the first place. One of the challenges is that when we have an impulse to do something, any bad habit, be it bite our nails or curse or criticize ourselves, there is an element of repetition that actually releases a feel-good chemical because it puts out short-term fire. So every time we give into an impulse, our brain codes that experience as a good thing. We reinforce a behavioral pattern and create changes in our brain that make us more likely to keep that pattern going. And while it feels momentarily good to give in to the impulse, it reinforces a negative pattern, a pattern that we can get addicted to. So it's important to explore, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And what are those knee-jerk tendencies that we find ourselves falling under? And ask yourself, what am I really wanting when I make that move, when I make that decision? Am I being compulsive? Am I giving into a knee-jerk reaction in order to get some sort of gain? Or can I gain more mastery over myself if I start to build my self-regulation muscle? Research shows that the more you use your self-regulation, the stronger it gets, just like a muscle that you would work out. But the caveat is that in the short term, our muscles actually get fatigued. The same way that it would if you were lifting weights and the first 10 repetitions feel really easy and then the last 5 start to get really hard because your muscles fatigue. Research shows that the more we use our willpower and our self-regulation and train ourselves not to give in to those impulses, the stronger we get over time. So while it's a simple strategy to say redirect those behaviors, don't give in to that impulsive desire, practice building your willpower. It takes time and practice, but I encourage you to think of every single knee-jerk reaction as perhaps an opportunity to move towards greater personal mastery by not giving into the thought or impulse, and instead creating a more conscious behavior. Next up, listen to Positive Psychology in Action with our Practitioner Corner. Hello everyone, with me today is Sandy Brower. She is a consultant teacher and positive psychology practitioner. She is a graduate of our Certificate in Applied Positive Psychology program that she did in Boston with Christine Duvivier. And we're so excited to have Sandy here with us because she gets to work with positive psychology and teenagers when they are going through some vulnerable times in their life. They're in transition. They're thinking about who they are and how they want to be in the world, and such a perfect time to apply positive psychology. Sandy, we're so happy and so grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm very pleased to be here and very excited to share with you what I've been doing.
Thank you, Sandy. So tell us, what brought you to positive psychology?
It started back in 2007. I was working as a teacher aide in a high school. I decided I wanted to become a teacher, so I went back to school, and in the process I had taken a psychology course. It was a basic psychology course, and the text for that was Martin Seligman's Authentic Happiness book. And it kind of got me hooked on positive psychology, and things just kind of grew from there. I chose to integrate positive psychology within the school for high school students.
What do you find resonates the most with your high school students?
What I'm finding is it takes a little while for the students to kind of get comfortable with the idea of recognizing that they have their own personal strengths. But once they do, they seem to be very pleased and proud to be able to tell a little bit about themselves and to be able to explore their personal strength and build that up.
It's so interesting, right, in our culture, how it's difficult for children and adults as well to recognize their strengths or to own their strengths. It's as though something bad will happen if I acknowledge what's right about me.
That's right. And that's what I see is the kids are so used to thinking ill of themselves or the negative about themselves that it's kind of strange for them to think, oh, wow, I do have something good about me that I can share with other people.
Yeah. And what are some of the different ways in which you've been integrating strengths into the classroom or into your work with them?
I did a summer bridge program this past winter, and we started out doing the strength stories with the kids. And like I said, it took them a while to be able to stop and think about themselves in a good way. I had them do actually a writing activity, writing about something that they were proud of that they had done. And some of them, it was very exciting. We allowed them to, if they chose to read it to the classroom, to the kids, that they could. And they really started getting into it. They wanted to share themselves and they wanted to get feedback from their classmates on their stories. So we started out doing that, and then we put posters around the room because we had 6 classes that we were teaching, and we would put a poster for each class, and on that poster we put the student's name and their top strength and how they were going to use that strength. And then we had them do a project adventure game where they had to pretend that they were in the cold tundra. They were stranded, and they had to erect a shelter. And we put them in groups. They had to erect a shelter to protect themselves. And we put them in groups, but we grouped them according to their strengths. And then they were supposed to use their strengths to work together as a team to build their structure. And they had a lot of fun with that. They really did. A strength story is when you ask a person we ask the students to think about a time in their life when they felt that they were at their best, a time when they were the most happy or most proud of who they were and what it was that they had done. So we had them write that story. And some of the examples we got were when students were in track, for instance, and they set a new PR for themselves. One story that stood out to me was a young lady who is living with her mother who is very ill, and she is the oldest of, I believe, 3 children. She's only 16, 17 years old, and she takes the responsibility of taking care of her mother and her younger siblings, as well as going to school. And she felt that that was a huge struggle for her, but we all pointed out to her the strengths that she is displaying by being able to do all that. It really made her, I think, feel really good that she was able to, that we were all able to recognize that what she was doing was wonderful for her family. And she's a very strong person and caring person to be able to do that.
What a celebration of who she is and giving her an opportunity to be recognized. I personally was going through something very similar when I was 16, 17 years old in high school and taking care of my mother and trying to balance her health needs. I could just very quickly teleport myself into the mind and the heart of that young teen, because on the one hand, it's your life, so it feels so normal. And then on the other hand, there's this part of you that's just dying to be seen and to be heard. And so such a gift to create a space where people can really be seen.
And get the support from her classmates and her teachers for what she was doing, that she wasn't in that struggle alone. We were all there to support her.
And what are some ways that positive psychology is personally impacting your life?
Personally impacting my life is absolutely huge. I struggled for many years with extreme anxiety and panic attacks, and that's part of the reason that led me to working with teenagers, is because my panic attacks and anxiety started when I was in high school, and I wished that I had, something or someone, some type of direction to help me. And in finding positive psychology, that has helped me to grow so much myself and overcome a lot of my anxieties and help me find a new direction in my life.
I'm curious, what's an obstacle that you've experienced where you feel that positive psychology has specifically supported you?
I think it would have to be goal setting. I would always set a goal, but I was never able to really fully get it done. So using some of the habit formations, learning about the habit loop and how we can change our behaviors using primers has been a huge help to me to be able to set things up so that I can actually reach my goal, has been a huge help, I think.
Thank you, Sandy. And those of you listening, if you're not familiar with what a habit loop is a process of how we understand all habits, good habits, bad habits. And they start off with there being some sort of trigger. And a trigger is something that reminds you that you want to do something. And the trigger could be a craving for sugar because it's the end of the meal, or a trigger could be waking up first thing in the morning and seeing your meditation cushion and knowing that it's time to take on the second part of the loop, which is the behavior that you take on, whether it be eating chocolate or doing meditation. And then the reward is what happens at the end of that habit loop, because usually there's some element of a rewarding experience, be it putting out the fire of wanting to do something and now you've actually done it, or the reward of feeling accomplished and having it done it. Sandy, I'm curious, what are some of the goals that you've achieved or habits that you've set as a result of having had learned the science of positive psychology?
The two biggest things is controlling my eating habits. A lot of times when I sit down at my desk and I'm working and sitting, I start to get itchy and I want to get up and I start reaching for food. So what I did was I set myself a note on my computer that says, if you feel itchy and want to eat, then you will stop and do a mindfulness meditation. It sounds kind of silly, but it seems to work for me, that I just look at that note and say, oh my gosh, let's stop eating and sit and meditate for a couple of minutes. And that seems to help.
That's so awesome. I love that you've put that into practice. Those of you listening, in positive psychology research, we call that an implementation intention, or a when-then statement, or if-then statement. So if A happens, then I will do B. And it's so cool because it's so simple. And as Sandy just pointed out, it can be so powerful because you're basically programming your brain with what you want it to do, with what it should do. In doing so, you're setting your brain up for success because it has a roadmap. It knows what to do when that instance happens, rather than just leaving it up to chance in that moment.
Yeah, because it's such a habit that you don't even think about what you're doing. You just do it. So the primer helps to make me stop and think about what I'm going to do and change it to something that is a little bit more healthy and better for me.
In your application of positive psychology professionally, what do you think are some of the barriers that teachers face in trying to get positive psychology into schools, and how have you overcome them?
One of the biggest challenges with implementing positive psychology into schools for teachers is time. Our schedules are so full of other things that we have to do, implementing lessons and following protocol, that it's a little difficult to try to switch things and do things just a little bit different.
Wow, Sandy. What are some strategies for self-care that support and nourish you?
The biggest strategy for self-care is the mindfulness. Whenever I start to feel overwhelmed or stressed out, where I can't figure out how to do things or life is piling up on me, I immediately, and actually I'm still practicing this too, is to be able to stop and do some deep breathing and do some mindfulness and to recenter myself so that I could have some clarity in my thinking, and calm my system. I'm finding that to be a huge help.
And you mentioned earlier that you used to have panic attacks or struggle with anxiety. How does that show up in your life now?
Oh, it's such a difference. I was actually to the point where I had what was called agoraphobia. I couldn't leave the house. I was terrified of socializing with people, and being able to do the mindfulness and to practice some of the other concepts in positive psychology. I've been able to get out more and share more and be a lot more comfortable with who I am and to let myself be okay with people. And practicing, like I said, practicing the mindfulness has been huge in helping me to get there.
Can you tell us, what is your practice of mindfulness like? And the reason I ask is because I feel that many people use this word mindfulness or mindfulness practice, and it can mean so many different things to so many people. So can you walk us through how you do this thing called mindfulness?
Yes. As soon as I start feeling anxious or overwhelmed, I stop and I sit down. I just find a place to sit, or I even stand sometimes. And I'll close my eyes and just start the deep breathing and focus on that breath. And a lot of times I will also add in the words, I'm okay, or relax, and I'll kind of breathe to those words. I focus in on my breath and how my body feels when I take a deep breath in. I feel the muscles in my chest expand, and then I feel it all relax. And I just stay with that feeling, for as long as I need to, 5-10 minutes, until I feel comfortable. And then I come out and open my eyes and say, okay, I'm going to start all over and begin again.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Sandy. And if you were to give our listeners just one tip or one way in which they could apply positive psychology in their life, what would you invite them to consider?
Gosh, there's so much. Positive psychology offers so much out there to help people that I think one thing that also has been a huge help to me is the ABC model. Thinking about the event that happens, your belief about the event, and then the consequences of that. If you could take the time to stop and think about how you're reacting, do a pause, I guess is how I would say it. If a situation isn't going like you wish it were, or you're reacting to it in a way that you're not happy with, take that pause and do some time for reflection and think about this, reflect on the situation. And reflection is huge, actually, because if you reflect on the event that happened and the consequences of the event, you can reflect on how your beliefs shaped that event.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandy. And those of you listening if you're not familiar with the ABC model comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy, but can be used by any of us to help us separate out the things that are triggering us from our thoughts and beliefs about the situation, from how those things are making us feel. So the A stands for the activating event, the actual facts of what has happened. The B stands for our thoughts and B, beliefs about the situation, and the C stands for consequences, or the emotions and actions that the trigger, the activating event, is making you do. And so what I hear you saying, Sandy, is that the awareness of this model enables you to reflect upon the situation in a way that really serves you.
Yes, definitely. And being able to do that definitely helps you to get a new perspective on not just yourself, but the situation, so that you can kind of change the way you think and then change the way you behave and respond to people and situations.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Sandy. Thank you for sharing with us the wonderful work you're doing with teenagers. It is such a vulnerable time in people's lives, and so it's exciting to know that they're being exposed to the science of positive psychology and to their strengths and what's possible for them. And I'm really excited to hear about how this next wave of class goes for you and for your teens. And thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you, Amelia. I was very happy to take the time to talk with you and to share my experiences with your audience.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you are enjoying the Flourishing Center podcast. We do our best every single week to give you a simple and easy to apply bit of science into your life, along with some life hacks. And most importantly, we want to inspire you with the true stories of people just like yourself that are making a positive impact in the world. And if you're enjoying this podcast, give us a rating. We would love to hear from you. This helps us spread the word to other people that might benefit from the incredible research science coming out of the field of positive psychology and mind-body medicine. So thank you again for listening. Feel free to check out more of our resources in our programs at www.theflourishingcenter.com. And until then, may you each find your own flourishing center.